Well, good morning, Center for Spiritual Living, Greater Las Vegas. My name is Reverend Laura Hallett, and it is my pleasure to be here with you this morning. For those of you that are joining us from someplace other than Southern Nevada, welcome to our service, and we're so happy to have you here with us. And for those of you that are a little bit further east of us, we are knowing that this weather that you're experiencing right now clears up quickly and easily, but enjoy the snow in the meantime. Now I want to give special thanks to our practitioners who are in service today. We had Clay T. White do a beautiful meditation and invocation just to set the tone for our morning together. We have Bobby Williams and Judy Petit who are sitting high watch, holding you in that consciousness of peace and grace throughout our time together. And always, our practitioners are wonderful. If you ever need any prayer support, please make sure you reach out to them. You can find the information for that on our website at www.cslglv.org. And I want to thank Melissa Allen and Justin Vogel for the beautiful music they provided this morning. It is always such a wonderful opportunity to sit in contemplation of spirit as we listen to these beautiful musicians and singers deliver their gifts to us. And I want to give great thanks to Joe Blom and all of the support we get from his media team that brings this service together to you each morning. And so it is just a delight again to be here and to just be exploring these ideas that we've been working with this month. This month our theme has been Living Everyday Wonder, and it's part of CSL International Organization's global themes for 2022. And so for the month of January, we're looking at that idea of living everyday wonder. And we've been looking at concepts like awe and wonder and curiosity and the type of questions that we ask and how this affects our lives in so many different ways. Today's talk is entitled Prove It. You know, when our founder, Ernest Holmes, began to synthesize the work that he turned into this philosophy, he called his work the science of mind. And the philosophy that he developed is named religious science. Now, it's interesting that he intentionally used the word science in both of those situations. You know, the Oxford Dictionary defines science as an intellectual and practical activity, encompassing the systematic study of structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experimentation. It is an intellectual and a practical activity, and it involves observation and experimentation. You know, mere intellectual knowledge of spiritual concepts is never going to be enough. Having a rudimentary understanding of the spiritual concepts is good for you. It's the basis for it. It's what we have to start with. But if we don't do something with that, then our lives don't change. We don't actually develop a deep, abiding understanding of what we're talking about there. Simply talking about and announcing spiritual principle or spiritual truths is really never going to get us anywhere. In fact, it's what we in modern day call spiritual bypass. When we can talk a good game, but there's no changes in our lives. Ernest Holmes called this spiritual malpractice. He said, one of the greatest difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. That's quoted from the Science of Mind textbook. Too much thought about the theory and too little actual practice. My experience with Science of Mind was that when I actually began to apply what I was learning in a scientific, systematic way, then I began to see changes in my life. You know, one of our most popular axioms in our movement here is change your thinking, change your life. It's honestly the basic assumption that informs our concept of the creative process and the method in which we bring about change in our life. But when was the last time you applied this in any consistent way in your life? When did you actually experiment with it and try it and see if you could make a change in your life by engaging in this activity? Last week, we explored the values of asking questions. And this week we're looking at, this month we've been looking at wonder, awe, and curiosity, the power of those things in our lives. When we look at the questions that we're asking and we change the questions, then as we talked about last week, we change the quality of our lives. And asking good questions opens us to a greater inquiry into and an exploration of this whole idea of change your thinking, change your life. Again, I can say that over and over and over again, but I'm not going to experience any results from it until I actually apply it. So what does changing your thinking really mean? It means that we not only change what we think about, but we also have to change the way that we think. In order to really change our lives, it must be more than just our thinking. We must also change our belief systems and our behaviors. Our behaviors and our beliefs arise from our experiences. And what we think about and what we believe also influence our experiences. So it's kind of a cyclic thing. In order to actually begin to see some change in our lives, we actually have to begin to experiment with it and see, okay, if I take something that I'm believing right now, and I apply some of these spiritual truths to it, some of these spiritual principles that we've been reading about, studying about, thinking about, talking about for so long, I can actually begin to shift my experience. So just like any scientist, we go through the scientific process with this. But we don't have to outline the processes like we would do like I did when I was teaching biology to sixth graders. We actually begin to start with a question. Our question comes from our observations, from things that we are experiencing. And when we begin to do that, then we can set up this question, and then we can set up an experiment that goes along with it to see what we can do. Even if we're not using petri dishes and Bunsen burners and microscopes, we can create an experiment in our lives. Our life becomes our laboratory. So let's take a look at one idea, one aspect of this. When I first started at Science of Mind, the first class I took was treatment and meditation class. I had no clue what treatment was, but I was intrigued by meditation. Little did I know I would find a powerful practice within the class of the practice of treatment. And so after a while of taking the class, I thought, you know what? These people that are around me, they seem to believe that this thing works, that this treatment thing works. So let me do a little experiment and see if I can actually begin to shift something in my life. And so at that time in my life, I was challenged by my finances. I had a tendency to spend too much. And then at the end of the month, I was struggling to have enough money to cover things that I needed to do. And so I thought, well, let me apply this idea of changing my thinking, changing my life to this, and this practice of treatment, whatever this thing is. And for those of you that don't know, it's our form of prayer. It's a affirmative prayer. And so let me apply it and see what I can do. And so I started off with, I pay my bills on time, and incorporating that statement of truth into my treatment work. And it was pretty good. You know, I started actually seeing a little bit of movement in that, where they were actually being paid on time. And then I thought, well, okay, let's see if I can expand this a bit. And so I said, I pay my bills on time and I have money left over to do the things I want to do. I thought, okay, so I worked with that for a couple of weeks, and you know, things really started opening up for me. I had a little bit of extra money in the account each week, and so it was kind of a nice feeling. And then I thought, well, this seems to be working, so let me try to take it another step further. So I pay my bills on time. I have money left over to do the things I want to do and to support the causes I believe in. And that was when I began to actually systematically do our practice of tithing. At that time, it was not anywhere near 10%, which is the technical definition of tithing, but it was certainly more than I had been giving before. And I began to see big changes happening in my lives. And so taking this idea of abundance and prosperity and all the spiritual things I had heard about it, you know, that we live in an infinite universe, and you know, God is our source of everything, I actually began to live with those truths and apply them in a consistent way in my life, and began to experience changes. I thought, this is pretty cool. Edwin Gaines talks about the same thing in her book, The 4 Laws of Spiritual Prosperity, A Simple Guide to Unlimited Abundance. She shares a story of how she experimented with the practice of tithing, and how tithing her very last dollar opened the floodgates to changing her life forever. I had a similar instance. I was getting ready to go on vacation, and I was leaving on vacation a few days before my payday. And I was thinking, if I don't give my tithe this month, I could just hold on to that, and then when I come back from my vacation, I'll give it. I'll go ahead and contribute that, so that the church won't be out any money, but I could wait and I could have that little extra money to start for the start of my vacation. And I had my check already written out, and I was sitting in my car at the church, and I was having this conversation in my head, and so I left the check in my car. Thought, okay, I'll just pay that next week. And so I started walking into the sanctuary, and I got about halfway there, and I turned around and I went back and got the check. It wasn't like a conscious thought. It was just like, okay, that's what I'm doing. And I went back and I got it, and went ahead and put the check in there. So I was trusting. I was trusting that I was going to have enough abundance, enough supply to have a good time on my vacation. And so didn't think anything more about it. The next day, when I get home from work, I have a check in the mailbox. Now, it was a check that I was for teaching a class that I was doing for a university, and I knew it would be coming, but I didn't think it would be coming for another 5 weeks, because that we normally got paid after we finished the class. But unbeknownst to me, the university had changed its policy and had started to pay us half the money after the first half of the class, and then send us the remaining money at the end of the class. So I had a check for $1,200 to take on my vacation that I wasn't expecting. And for me, that was just really tangible proof that when I trusted in this idea of supply and abundance, that when I took those principles that I had been studying, I actually put them into practice, then things opened up in my life. And I have to say, I have consistently tithed ever since, and that I really don't have a problem with financial abundance anymore, because I have actually proved these principles in my life. So Ernest says that we can only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. We can only know as much as we can actually prove by actual demonstration. And so it's when we demonstrate those principles, when we actually see those principles come alive in our lives, that's when we know it. That's when we have a knowledge that cannot be taken away from us. That's when we have proved that principle to ourselves in such a way that it is now permanently part of our living experience. We have proved the principle. My favorite quote of all times in spirituality is from Michael Beckwith in his book, Spiritual Liberation. And he says that rudimentary spirituality is theory. Advanced spirituality is practice. We can know all the theory we want to know, and it's good, and we have to have it as a basis for what we know, for what we can actually prove in our lives. But until we begin to practice it, then things in our lives are not going to shift and change. So, I have this thing that's been coming up for me, and it has actually been in my consciousness for a long, long time, probably 25 years or more. I have these friends in my life that actually get great joy out of walking. Now, to me, that is one of the most unbelievable things, because I've never gotten great joy out of walking. But there has been a call in my life to walk. And as I said, it's been for over 25 years. And I'm not talking about just like walking for health. I'm actually talking about a long, extended walk. I read 25 years ago a book about walking the Appalachian Trail. For those of you that are not familiar with it, the Appalachian Trail is on the east coast of the United States. It runs from Georgia to Maine. It is the longest hiking-only footpath in the world, and it's about 2,200 miles. It usually takes people 5 to 7 months to do it. Now, I am in no place right now in my life to even consider that. One of the other things that's been calling to me is the Camino De Santiago, the Way of St. James in Spain. It's about 500 miles. It usually takes over a month to walk it. Both of those are enormous things, but they call at me all the time. They call at me all the time. And so for me, there's something there. But I have this idea, I don't really care to walk. It hasn't been something, but there's something about it that I know. Well, one, I know intellectually that walking is very good for my body. Walking is very good for my soul. It's a place where you can really get into contemplative meditation, mindfulness practices. I follow Thich Nhat Hanh, who is constantly talking about allowing our feet to kiss the earth. When we walk, we allow each step to kiss the earth. I mean, to me, that is a phenomenal image of how when I engage in this spiritual practice of walking, that I actually am, and I'm honoring the earth, that I'm kissing the earth as I walk. What a phenomenal thought that is. 3 of my very dearest friends are always talking about the joy they get out of walking. And it's something I can't even imagine. So I am willing for this year to make an experiment, to do an experiment with walking. And I'm very hesitant to say this because when you say it publicly, you're kind of committed to it. But I am also in my life totally committed to walking my talk, pun intended. So I'm going to commit right now to walking every day to see if I can actually get the joy out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it through the scientific process, the scientific method, we call it. People that are like me that were scientists for early on. So in the scientific method, I have a little chart here to show you what exactly it is. So in the scientific method, first I make an observation. So my observation is these people, no matter how crazy I think they are, enjoy walking. That's my observation. People enjoy walking. So I'm going to ask a question now, the second step of the process. And my question is, can I enjoy walking? Right. So I formulate a hypothesis. If I walk consistently, I will enjoy walking. That's my hypothesis for my experiment. And then I construct an experiment. My experiment, the guidelines for my experiment would be to walk daily. And I'm not putting limits on that, but I plan in my experimentation to increase the amount of walking that I do each day. Okay, so now I'm through the 4th step. Now I test and gather data, which means I actually have to get out and walk. That's where I have to begin to practice it. Practice this idea, gather the data to see if they're right. And then I form a conclusion. Oh my goodness, walking makes me happy. That would be the conclusion of this. And then the final step, which I did not include on the chart here, is to share your results. And so at the end of the year, we're going to see how my results were. As I said, I am committed truly 100% and literally to walking my talk. And so my call to action for you is to choose an area of your life. You know, we're going to be looking through all the different life structures throughout this year. So we'll be looking next month, we're looking at our inner life. We're moving on to play, creativity, emotions. And then in the summertime, we're going to get into the physical body, health, our relationships, nature, being outdoors. And then in the fall, we'll go into work, finances, home, and finally into community for the December. Is there an issue in one of these areas of your life where you know the spiritual truth behind it, but you're not actually experiencing that in your life? If there is, find that area and ask a question. Can I do this and change it? I've made an observation. I've got the research, the data to support it. I've done all my spiritual work around studying and observing and so forth. Now, what can I do with that? You know, formulate a hypothesis, apply the scientific method and process it and test it. You know, collect the data, analyze the results, see if there's a change in your life. It doesn't have to be a year-long thing. It can be a week-long thing. See if you can take one of the areas of your life that's challenging to you and see if you can begin to apply what we've learned, our spiritual belief system, our principles, our practices, and see if you can affect a change in your life. It begins by changing how we think about things and then systematically and consistently applying these things to our lives. I think we have a grand adventure waiting for us, folks. I think there's something really big that's wanting to be birthed through us right here and right now, through each and every one of us. As we do this work, as we learn these principles, as we are willing to ask the question and then take action on what's revealed. As I said, I'm really hesitant about saying that I'm going to walk, but that's the only way I can prove it, and it won't go away. So there you have it. All right, so let's just take a moment here and to take all of this into prayer. Again, our spiritual mind treatment, it works. It works. And I'm going to have to add walking to my spiritual mind treatment. So there we go. All right, so let's just turn within. And what I mean by that is we just simply find a way to relax our bodies. Closing our eyes sometimes helps. I know people who lift their eyes up high. It's whatever works for you to get yourself into a place of feeling at peace. And so resting in this place of deep abiding peace, I know that there's only one thing, only one power, only one life. I know that one reveals itself as many different ideas and concepts and forms. It has been known as God, the universe, Spirit, the divine. It has been given individual names, individual forms. I know that it transcends all thought, all belief, all shape and all form. For I know that it is that energy that moves the universe. It is that creative intelligence that has brought forth everything into expression. It is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. It is all there ever was and all there ever will be. For nothing exists outside of this one. And since I know this all-encompassing presence is throughout the universe, I know that it is in me, that it is moving through me as me, in all that I am and all that I do. I know there is no place where I begin and it ends. It is simply one. And I am but a drop in its ocean. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for every single person out there. Every bit of creation is that perfect emanation of the One, endowed with all that God is, with that divine intelligence, that unconditional love, that perfect peace, that creativity and wisdom and grace that is living itself through each and every one of us. And so in complete realization of this power and this presence, I speak my word. I know that each and every one of us is a divine being in human form. And that we are endowed with all that we ever need to allow our lives to be that full manifestation of the One. I know that it is through our understanding and our application of spiritual truth that our lives are transformed. That which we practice changes our lives. That which we apply becomes the fundamental basis of all that we understand. It is the beginning of embodiment, the beginning of allowing truth to live through us and to show up in our lives as us. I know that the divine grace of the One leads us to a greater and greater understanding of itself as us in all that we are and all that we do. And I know that as we practice these principles and embody these truths, our lives unfold magnificently and beautifully in perfect and divine ways. And I just give thanks for this knowing. Thanks for this embodied truth. Thanks for the willingness to do the practice. And I release this word into the law, to that creative mind that always says yes, knows no lack or limitation, is boundless and endless, and continuously operating in each and every one of our lives. I release it, I let it go, and I let it be. And so it is. Amen.